This changes the entire landscape of ownership in the form that we've ever known. This is why it's so exciting.
Tokenization is something that will change the world. In this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive on tokenization, what it means, and how it's going to change investing forever. So, Eric's our cryptocurrency expert, digital asset expert here at Verde Capital Management. I want to talk to you a little bit about a deep dive into tokenization. If you haven't watched our first two videos, please go back and watch those videos because this is an advanced topic on what's happening next in the world of crypto. But I really am fascinated by this idea of tokenization. So what exactly is a token and how are they being used today to take real world assets and put them onto a blockchain?
So it's a digital representation of a physical asset.
Okay. So in many cases, I might have, let's say, a physical asset like a house. In my house, I might have a deed for that house. That deed is essentially a paper representation of my ownership of this house. Why would I want it to be on a blockchain? What specifically about a blockchain allows me to do something with it that I can't do right now?
It's immutable. It can't be touched in a way where it can be altered or changed.
So somebody can't just forge it and basically say, here's my signature and now I own your house, right?
It's impossible.
Okay. I know that sometimes when I'm trading real world assets, especially like real estate as an example, right? I have to use a title company because if I'm selling you this piece of real estate, you don't trust that I'm going to give you free and clear title, and I don't trust that your check is going to clear. So we need a referee essentially in the middle. How does blockchain deal with this?
It takes out the middleman. So when it comes to the blockchain, we are able to think of it as actually coding into the system the contractual details that allows it to be clear what's actually occurring so we can actually transact and have the deed and the home go to the other person.
Can this be done for any physical asset? Can I do this with stock?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest topics today.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's already occurring. Robinhood is one of the more obvious examples. You have other custodians that are also discussing this.
And Robinhood, if I remember correctly, just did this in Europe. They just tokenized two private companies, SpaceX and OpenAI, and they gave away some stock.
We did. So think of Robinhood as being the most innovative from the custodial standpoint within this arena. They're pioneering it, especially as there's been more of an openness with regulation.
Why not Sam Altman at OpenAI? Why not go public and just do an initial public offering and offer your stock to everybody? Isn't that superior?
There's attorneys, there's exchanges, there's paperwork, there's multiple middlemen, there are multiple levels of different fees, and honestly, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And I would say complicated and expensive.
It is extremely expensive to list on an exchange like the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. Last time I think I looked at it, it was over $2 million in just administrative things and filings and disclosures that you have to do to become publicly traded. A lot of companies are just like choosing to bypass that because there's so much money in the private markets that you can essentially raise money. And for a lot of us that are investing in the stock market, this is actually a huge tragedy because a lot of the most innovative companies that we're seeing today in AI, for example, they're all private. Tokenization, from what I understand, allows there to be kind of like a backdoor to where a company could technically go public, but do it on a blockchain without that added cost and scrutiny.
Beyond that, if you're doing something specifically with blockchain technology and you're giving everyone access, you are literally allowing anyone, irrespective of their differences, to be able to have access to something, and the level of transparency that's tied to blockchain technology and having access potentially any moment of the day outside the range of exchange hours.
So not 9 to 4 anymore, 24/7.
That's probably one of the most creative aspects of it.
So other than the 24/7 trading, what are some other benefits to tokenization?
This could potentially give you access to a range of companies that don't exist in any form on a public exchange. So think of, we see a small subset of the overall landscape of companies. Imagine the other hundreds and hundreds of thousands of businesses that are out there, from the local laundromat to the local mom and pop restaurant.
My favorite restaurant downtown, they could have their stock trading on some blockchain and I can own a piece of that.
Theoretically, yes.
Wow. And right now, to do that, I'd have to know the owner. I'd have to go there, probably inject a big chunk, and I'd have really no shareholder rights whatsoever because I'd be such a small minority. But now through an exchange or through a blockchain, I could essentially now own private stock.
This changes the entire landscape of ownership in the form that we've ever known. This is why it's so exciting. If you look at the next couple of years, even the next number of decades, this changes even what investments look like, where up to this point, it's been, we're going to access a stock we're going to access a mutual fund or an ETF, that by default seems like it is somewhat generic and basic. This sort of takes it to the next iteration of what money and owning can be.
So many of our viewers, interestingly enough, on this channel are business owners. What does this mean for them? If they have a small business, let's say they own an excavating company, and maybe they have 40, 50 employees, maybe they've got a couple $1 million sunk into their company. How does this help them?
First things that come to mind is you get direct access to your biggest raving fans. Them also want to have a stake in your business in some form. What that also creates is you get liquidity. For most business owners, the biggest issue that we see is that there can at times be hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions, stuck in a business that
Tied up in that company
has illiquidity. Naturally creates a moment where they can either have liquidity by selling some of the stock or do other nuanced things that just weren't even a possibility before.
Can they borrow against their company?
Why not?
That's a super important point. Today, if you look at firms, right, the publicly traded companies and the venture-backed firms almost have this unfair advantage versus most small businesses, right? If you're venture-backed, anytime you need to do something, you can go to your investors and just raise more capital. If you are a publicly traded company and you can go out there and issue bonds and raise money. If you are like the mom and pop shop in Clarkston and you have one restaurant, even though that restaurant might be worth millions of dollars, you're going to be punitively borrowing at your local bank on a home equity line, an SBA loan of some sort. It levels that playing field to where now you can essentially borrow against the value of your stock, which by the way is the way I think Elon bought Twitter without selling one share of Tesla. Tokenization is something that I think will change the world. So exciting. There's obviously big things happening here in this market. Watch it. Europe is kind of ahead of us on this. I hate to say that, but there's regulatory changes that hopefully will bring this to the US. And we're going to be watching it here very closely at Verde. If you want to invest in crypto, or if you're interested in this topic, feel free to reach out to this guy. His name's Eric Tomaszewski. He will be here available to answer your questions. And we hope you join us for the next series, which is coming next Wednesday. Thank you.